Welcome to the Profit Talks podcast, hosted by the Orange County Inland Empire SBDC Network, funded in part by the U.S. Small Business Administration and the California Office of the Small Business Advocate. This show is the go-to resource for business owners seeking empowerment, education, and resources to succeed. Join us as we connect you with experts, share the triumphs of fellow entrepreneurs, and reveal the wealth of assistance available to you today to level up your business. So let's go. Let's dive in and learn more. And today we're going to learn about one of my favorite topics, which is how to be in business with a real retail store. Full disclosure, I had a bar for 10 years called Kelly McHugh's, and I learned so much about leasing and entitlements and brick and mortar locations. I thought I knew a lot until I met this person, one of the SBDC best consultants on the topic of leasing. Welcome, if you will, Karie Armstrong. Welcome.
Really excited to be here. Can't wait to get going.
I got so excited and turn your mic up there. Okay. You really have retail experience, not from the sense that I did of owning a retail location, but from the other side, from the management side here, right? You ran some pretty big malls.
Yeah, I did that for 25 years. And, I always joke around saying, look, I was the big bad, landlord for 25 years. So just let me work with small business owners so I can earn my wings back to heaven. And I help them get a lease that's not quite so full of alligators, And
let's mention a couple of them. The last mall, we're talking about the biggest malls in Southern California, like the Brea Mall. You were in charge of management for that?
I was the senior general manager for that shopping center.
Wow.
Yeah.
But before we go too deep into the world of retail stores, whether it's shoe stores or bars and restaurants like I was involved in, let's talk about the change in malls just for a second. Malls have gone through a massive rethinking, at least here in Southern California, maybe nationwide. When I was a kid, when you were a kid, the malls were everybody. When you started off as a high school kid, that's where you went and hung out, and you spent all weekend there, the movies and shopping and everything else. And then when you became younger, older, you went and took your kids there. You started to have kids. You spent all day at the mall with your kids, and you walked around with the strollers and stuff. And then later on, you're building a house, and all these things just have changed. Malls have really, they haven't gone away, but they've certainly shrunk, and they've certainly changed in a lot of dramatic ways. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, I think that we used to joke around and say we were over-malled back in the 70s when malls first came on board. Everywhere. But, the truth of the matter is that, there needs to be some redevelopment and some land use changes, things like that. But retail is still, as long as it's experiential and it holds your interest, it's going to be around for a very long time. Underwhelming retail is what is dying off. If a retailer can't keep pace, right, if they don't know who their core customer is.
And why I should come in. Why do I need to come? I'll give you a perfect example, and I'm not trying to pick on Staples or anything else, but any of these office supply stores, I've several of them come in through the years and talked about how they're trying to reimagine this space. What is it? I don't need to go in there and pick up paper unless I need it right now, or pencils or Staples and everything here. So they keep trying to figure out, maybe it's a copier center. Maybe there's some other experience. For a while, they did these Staples, whatever they call them, Staples spaces or something. They keep trying to figure out other ways to get you to come in, because otherwise, even within the store, they keep saying, just go over to the kiosk and order it there. We only have so much on stock now. Mm-hmm. We don't have 400 colors of pens anymore. We got 2. And if you want the other 200, well, they'll walk you right over to the kiosk. And I'm saying, then why don't I just stay home and go online? And I'm wondering if they're not wondering the same thing, or the CVSs of the world and stuff, where they're all trying to shrink their footprint or rethink why you walk in there. Is that what it's all about? Why do you walk in?
I think so. And, that's the cautionary tale for our small business owners, is that if you're going to have a place where people are going to visit you, then you have to say why.
Yes.
Should your clientele come in to see you? So what's your point of difference? What's your competitive advantage? What makes you amazing? Because if you're just going to exist in the realm of underwhelming, then why bother?
Why bother? Exactly.
And we could have a whole different conversation about this over a cup of coffee. But honestly, the e-commerce and those abilities, to be able to shop online does really beg to say to the small business owner, look, you have to have an omni-channel for sales. You can't just have your brick and mortar. You must be somehow accessible online as well. And then other ways of making sure that you can get to your customer. It's got to be an and. It can't just be an or anymore.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
So you've spent, 10, 12 years, 13 years now with the SBDC? Long time?
Yeah, rounding the bend on 13.
Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
I know. I thought I was going to be there for like a year. But I
this little transition thing, I'll try this.
Little thing, I'll give it a shot. But it's so much fun because working with these small businesses is one of the most rewarding things I've ever been able to do, because it's not this big, massive conglomeration. It's people's dreams. It's their families. It's their livelihood. And everything they do creates a legacy for those that are coming behind them in their own families and the people who work for them.
Well, I'll just do a shout out. Maybe I shouldn't call him up, but our regional director here, Mike Daniels, runs some family. I think they're like Rocky Mountain candy stores or something.
Yeah,
like
he's
that.
got
a couple of those.
Got a few of those.
And that's what his father built him, I think.
Yeah.
And he's the second generation.
Legacy owner.
Legacy owners. Now he's talking about his kids are working into the business and stuff.
Yeah.
So that was a dream of many of us, to have something tangible. You'd work in the store. That store would provide, in the same way that farmers had fields. In urban and suburban areas, you had a store, and that became your livelihood and your family's livelihood, and maybe a legacy for generations.
Absolutely, and I think that's one of the reasons why, making sure that lease really works for you rather than against you is one of the important things.
Because it's not a short-term endeavor.
No, and if you are looking to do a short-term lease, then I would ask you, why are you doing it? Maybe you're not ready. Maybe there's other options now, pop-ups and fairs and marketplaces and things like that.
Right.
So you don't have to, in the mall business, those short-term leases were the carts and kiosks that you'd see in the middle of the mall.
Yeah.
That's where you test, people are like, well, what should I put on there? Well, originally, did you know that those carts and kiosks were to test products from the bigger retailers to see if there was a demand? Yeah, and then it became a thing, and then all these
it became a business.
Then it became a business, and then all of a sudden we had these small business owners that were using them in order to launch their very basic retail experience.
Talk about pop-up. There's something I never heard of until a few years ago. It's this idea that if something just appears and it's going to be there for a short while. I used to think of them as art exhibits or something, a club or something, an experiential thing, and or a Halloween store that would just come and appear for a month or two and then it would disappear. But that's becoming more and more of a thing, these pop-ups.
It is, and the word pop-up has become kitschy. It's new, it's hip, it's whatever.
Yeah, right.
Whereas I'm just popping up, as opposed to I'm just a short-term lease retailer, right?
That doesn't sound very. Let's go shop at the short-term lease. I don't know if I want to buy something in that way. But,
because the connotation of a short-term tenant was, well, they're not going to be here, so should we buy from them? Because what if we wanted to
return it or
whatever,
or warranty or
and
something?
And then the flip side, though, is if it's a pop-up, I got to go now because they're not going to be here later.
Yeah,
right.
Urgency.
It's this sense of urgency and excitement that they've got to do. So, for a lot of my clients, that's how they start. They'll start, if they're a maker, artisanal, a baker, whatever, they start making in their garage or making, with the cottage food operator's license, and then popping up at these fairs and markets, only here once a month.
Yeah.
And so then it creates this demand, but for the customer or for our clients, for our small business owners, they start establishing proof of customer, proof of concept.
Yes.
It's not such a big buy-in. So if
will anybody buy my cookies? Will anybody buy my clothing? Yeah.
If my brand is underwhelming, then I'll know that early on, and I can pivot without these thousands of dollars a month rent. Right. So
exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
So pop-ups seem to be a new strategy. And then, of course, there are the kind of farmers markets or the street markets or other sorts of places you can pop up outside of the retail environment. And I see more and more at the great park here. They have various events, and I go out, and these people still have a dedicated business, but it's somewhere between a home business and a real brick-and-mortar store.
Yeah. And that doesn't mean, though, that they don't have to be licensed properly or insured properly.
Bingo.
Right? Or priced
Let's emphasize
properly.
that, because I think many of them think, I'm just going to bake cookies at home, and I'm going to bring them and sell them at the pop-ups thing, at the street fair or whatever.
Nope. Nope. So you do have to, and that leads me to, like, this is the first step you always need to figure out when you're starting your business is, what do I need? What do I have? What do I need? And many times it's the licensing, it's those legal things, it's that boring stuff that is you can't beg forgiveness on these things.
So full disclosure, I told you we were laughing. We almost started late because I'm going into all my war stories about opening a bar and restaurant at a place called Kelly McHugh's for almost 10 years in Mission Viejo. It was both a wonderful thing. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times, as they say. And I learned so many things the hard way. We learned so many things the hard way, my partners and I. We just thought we're going to go get a lease first. That was the most important thing. Let's get a good lease, a cheap lease, the right lease. And then when we got that, hooray, well, by the way, you go down this weekend and get the liquor license and go get the health department. I guess we need something. What else do we need? Oh, my goodness. And here we were a year later paying rent in a space that we hadn't opened.
Yeah, so I'm going to tell you a secret, even though
I wish you told it to me
late
10 years ago. Yeah.
The lease is the very last thing you touch. And there's a lot of work that goes into pre-negotiating the lease, but we don't need to sign a lease. We don't need to touch a lease until we have done quite a few steps leading up to that.
And we thought, am I the only idiot out there who thought the lease is the first and most important thing? The rest of it's just going to fall in place quickly.
No, I have a famous saying for all of you that do that. It's like, this is a pen, not a magic wand. Now that you've signed this lease, we need to get it up. I can't change what's on that piece of paper.
Yeah, right.
We can't.
You got they gave us 2 or 3 months free rent. We thought, hooray! By that time, we'll do it all.
Yippee! Do you know? And it's not just picking on any one city, but cities right now, to get out of the entire pre-construction planning process.
That department,
it is taking probably 90 to 120 days. And that's not because people are lollygagging. It's because, we've got a shortage of folks doing these jobs after post-COVID. They never refilled a lot of these
positions. Or many of the
positions.
cities sub them out. They don't have employees, so they're contracted with an outside agency to do this stuff. Yeah.
And just because you don't know what you're doing and you submit plans that need corrections doesn't mean you're not going to have to do the corrections.
Now here's the other, and I'm not trying to pick on cities, but I came in from because after we built this, we had other people who wanted to open bars and restaurants. I had a number of people, and for a couple of years I made a nice living off of going around and being this kind of for-hire gun that would go in and walk through this process. And like you, I was always shocked. It usually came to me when they ran up against a barrier. Yeah. Oh my God, we can't get this done ourselves, and they went out looking for somebody to help them. And what I was shocked with too through the years is, I won't say poorly, but you don't always get the right answer the first time you ask, whether it's the health department or the plan check or fire department. Some of this is debatable. Some of this is discussable. Some of this is, opinions and other sorts of things here. And some of it is just crazy enforcement of things. I could tell you all sorts of crazy things I saw health departments doing.
It's true. I'll tell you some of the best ways to get information is, well, first, let's make sure that we're hiring the right people on our team. So we need people that have done this before, not your Uncle Harry that, likes to swing a hammer and he's going to help you.
Or some cheap contractor I found that's going to do all this on the cheap quickly on the weekends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. Because, so they don't know. So you want to get somebody that's built
I'll give you a perfect example. So we did that. We made all the mistakes. That's how I learned. We thought, well, I'd never built a commercial kitchen before, ever. I knew nothing about it. We're going to open a bar. We're going to have a kitchen. So we hired somebody who said, oh, yeah, I know how to do this. And you want to have some grit because it's slippery back there. So we put this tile in it that had this real gritty finish to it.
Oh, no.
And already.
Oh, no.
Health department came in and said, what's this? It has to be smooth. It has to be washable. It has to be, like white tile. And we did all this fancy stuff. We spent a ton of money, and they made us rip it out.
That's that old saying of good money after bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you got to get it in the right.
Oh, my goodness. You know how much that costs?
It's how much time that took? It is a lot. And, and nobody's going to sit around saying, oh, poor you. You spent all this money and you did it wrong. So we'll just let it slide.
We'll let it wave.
No. So, and that takes me, the first thing I have somebody do when they say, look, I want to start leasing a space. I said, oh, okay. I ask, have you done your projections? And the answer is usually,
Again.
So I have some templates if you'd like to work through this. And the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is get together your equipment list, because it doesn't matter whether you're just selling T-shirts or if you're going to do a full-blown kitchen, right? We need to know, like, what do you need to put in the store? Because the other thing that everybody thinks is, well, I think I want just a little bit bigger so that I can grow into it.
Yeah.
And my answer to that is, when your mom took you shopping for school shoes when you were 7, she did not buy you shoes that were 2 sizes too big. Maybe it was a half a size bigger, right? Because you were going to grow into it. But leasing space that's too big for your use is just going to be a money pit, because the rent becomes exorbitant.
Yeah.
And so figure out what you need. What do you need? Where are you putting your fixtures? Where are you putting your cash wrap desk? Somebody asked me the other day, what is that? That's an old school term of, where do you check out? If you go into some of the big retailers today, you don't check out anywhere, because they all they walk around and they're checking you out electronically, digitally.
And again, somehow we just thought we could do this ourselves. And then we found out laying out a kitchen, and we're doing that's the most expensive and it wasn't just what we thought would work, or the chef thought would work, or the bartender would thought would work. What does the city require? You have to have so many square feet of dry storage. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Employee changing rooms and other sorts of things.
You know what? And you have to have drains in the appropriate places. And then you have to have clearance between. And what about that ADA bathroom?
ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act. We didn't even consider that. And suddenly we have threshold issues and going out to the parking lot and other things. I thought that's the landlord's responsibility.
Not unless you make sure it's in the lease that it is, right? See, these are those alligators. Leases have alligators in them beyond rent.
Well, the one that killed us, so I'll end the story with my thing. We're trying to tell your tale, and I'm sharing my woe-begone story here. Kelly McHugh's was a bar that was there for 10 years in the 90s, and we were so smart. We bought cheap insurance. We didn't put any sprinklers in the building because it was an old, funky building. And all this, it was on the second story, and all this stuff in this funky rundown center that had sat empty for years. We never looked into what was behind the walls and all the crazy fire electrical things and all that stuff.
What could possibly go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong? So when it did go wrong, and the entire shopping center went up in flames, and we'd also smart, we'd figured out a ways not to put in sprinklers and all this other stuff, and our thing is lost. We go back to the landlord, and they say, thank you very much. We're going to give you a blank. We'll rebuild it. But it's now blank. It doesn't have the bathrooms, doesn't have the kitchen. Well, you originally supplied all that, not me. That was 10 landlords ago. I'm not giving you all that. So you got to come up with $100,000 for that. And the rent now, you didn't see the special clause, and under subsection D, we can now change the rent that was laid out for 10 years. It goes from $1 a foot to $3 a square foot. Yeah. And on and on and on. And then we look at our lousy insurance, which is only because we were so smart. We don't need insurance, And it was so the bar never opened. A successful multi-million-dollar business went down the tubes because we had not ever thought about, didn't consult anybody about the lease, didn't think about all these what-ifs.
Yeah. And I tell my clients this, look, there's possibilities and probabilities, right? Is it possible? Is it probable? And then are you willing to pay the piper if it does come to fruition? And so leases, at the SBDC, we don't ever get into complete legal or tax kind of stuff. No. So at some point, I'm like, look, you have to go have your attorney look at it, because there's some other clauses in there that could bite you, and we don't even know that they exist. And we saw that during COVID.
Pages of these things, if you've ever seen a lease, the what if, and you just skip over that. Yeah, well, right.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah. So we used to, when I used to lead my teams as a landlord, right? And we would have to audit leases and figure out for billing purposes and stuff. Or I would be training people coming up through the ranks. And they're like, I can't get through this. And I said, reading a lease is like reading Shakespeare or the Bible. It's best done out loud. So I would make them.
That's a good point.
Literally read it out loud.
Because when you say the whereas of the party of the first part, insofar as they thought of the party of the second part, was once upon a time
And now we're just having a party.
So you gave me some notes here, and I got to throw a couple of these in. LOI. What's an LOI? We're talking about.
All right. So once we know what's going into this store, this space, right? Then we want to go to an LOI, so a letter of intent. And this is where we granularly start to negotiate the deal points, because we don't need to negotiate 170 bazillion pages. What we need to negotiate are the salient points off of 2 or 3 pages. These are non-binding. Letters of intent are non-binding. And I tell my clients,
For us, it was how the term of the lease or the...
Totally.
Or
how long how many options, base rent, is it triple net, is it gross, is it whatever, what's your tenant improvement allowance, what's the landlord building out, what's not, how much time free rent do you have, because that's a big component of that, and then what are your rent escalations year over year? Is it 3%, 4%, 5%? I had somebody come back to me, their landlord wanted to do a 5% year over year, and it's pretty traditionally it's 3. I think they started at 7, and they're like, well, it's inflation. I'm like, no, that's not how that works. Inflation is going to be recovered through your triple net costs, your CAM costs, right?
Can I give you another one that shocked me?
What?
Not in our space, but as I went out and did some consulting on this over a couple year period, the landlord would say, well, this space is 3,800 square feet. And you'd say, okay. And then we'd go measure it. I said, let's just measure it. It was 3,300 square feet, or it was 39. It was never more. It was always less.
Always less, yeah.
And I'm like, oh my goodness. And I'm like, well, we were guessing. I said, you drew architectural plans. You had all this stuff here. You built it out. But they changed the wall. They moved something else. And over time, maybe the landlord who owns this, that was 3-4 landlords ago.
Yeah, and they could have put a utility closet in there that makes it unusable, or and the thing, it's not like the drywall or the outside wall to the outside wall or inner wall to inner wall. It's to the studs, so you have to know how deep that wall pocket is.
Exactly.
And it goes back to get the right people on your team. And that not only
impacts what your rent is because you're paying per square foot, but also your triple net costs.
Totally.
Talk about triple net. People don't even understand this notion of triple net. I don't have a triple net when I go rent an apartment somewhere.
No. So triple nets, you'll see it written out as NNN sometimes also. So that's CAM, Common Area Maintenance, Taxes, and Insurance. And so the Common Area Maintenance is going to be
your share of that.
Your share, yeah.
There's the center's 100,000 square feet or whatever. You're 5,000. You're going to get 5% of that. Yeah.
Assuming that you negotiated it properly and they don't have a clause that says that the denominator is open and occupied, and so therefore, So now, as a little guy,
you're always coming up with stuff.
As a little guy, the big guy goes out, and all of a sudden you're getting your fair share. As the landlord thinks, your fair share, right? So we would want to make sure that those triple nets are calculated. If that's indeed in the lease, they're not probably going to change that, but we can put a floor to say that it's based on that the property is no less than 95% leased or 85% leased. So that if you've got a failing property and they're 50% vacant, you're not taking it on the nose as the little guy that didn't know how to negotiate that.
And I'll tell you another one is those common area maintenance charges. Too many in the old days, I don't know if it's still the new days, but these quick buck landlords would throw these centers up. And that's how they made money. They had huge common area because their management fees were built in there. So,
we would want to look for that. Generally speaking, your triple nets should not be inflated. They should be actuals being passed back. Yeah, and there will be maybe a 3% admin or a 10% admin, but you have to see what they've built into there. And then this is where you have to read the lease and or get your attorney to read the lease for what is reasonable and normal. Because some of these leases will become really, really wonky, and we want to look for that.
And of course, nobody ever, it says you can look at this, but we just paid it whatever. Once we negotiated it, we never touched it. Should they go back and really look at some of these numbers? I mean,
every time you get those reconciliations at the end of the year, you should pay attention. You have the right to ask. So, where's the tax bills? Because it's the property tax for the curb to curb. Right. And what people don't remember, or they don't know, they're like, this landlord is so greedy and they're just trying to bill us for everything. And it's like, well, yeah, that's their business.
That's their business.
So the business is the hard costs of the taxes, the insurance, and the physical need to keep it up, security, lighting, irrigation, all that kind of stuff, waste hauling, and then the rent.
Waste hauling, yeah, that's right.
And
all of that's gone up dramatically in recent times. We've had landlords come in here and they say, okay, you all want to beat us up, we're the bad guys, but did you know that my trash bill doubled? Did you know that my maintenance the maintenance crew to go out and do the parking lot? So do you want me not to do that or not to do it as often? And then it's trash in the parking lot and then it reflects on your business,
Look, if you're a restaurant and the cost of avocados triples, are you going to still sell me that piece of avocado for the same amount? No. You're going to have to raise your prices, right? So
same thing for the landlord.
Good landlords will manage properly to that, and then but you do have to know, because in some cases those triple nets can be as high as the rent. And especially in either a first generation project where they've just built it, to your point, where they're trying to recover everything. Or if you've got a wonky, old school type of a project that just got sold, that could release that Prop 13 tax protection, and the taxes can go up 300%. I managed a shopping center where that happened.
Right.
And that's...
Because they only reevaluate taxes like your house whenever somebody buys it. So you may have been paying the tax rate from a long time ago, but now when it's sold, there's a new property value, and the taxes get to get reestablished.
Instead of that 3%, now they get to completely reset it. So,
well, here's the problem, Karie. We've got 12 more things on your list, and we only got 2 or 3 more minutes left. We talked just about, we didn't even get into retail site selection. We just talked about negotiating lease.
So
we didn't talk about timelines and
let me take it
building
to the
it out and my God, borrowing money and all the other.
So let me bring it home for everybody. So first of all, we need to, if we can just start with that LOI, if we can make sure that we can align you with a good real estate broker, so that site selection is everything. Just because a
location.
Yeah,
right.
and it's not always where the big guys need to be. Sometimes it's where you need to be. It's where your customer is.
That was the key that we found. Our bar and restaurant was in a beat-up shopping center that nobody else had rented in years, but that's where our customers, because it was surrounded by apartments and young people who were looking to go out, and that was where we needed to be.
So be where your customer is, not where your address is, not where you wish you needed to be, but where you belong, right? Be clear about that. And then be reasonable knowing that timeline for the build out. It is going to take exponentially longer than you thought.
How long to get approved? How long to get it built? How long to get it approved? There's finals, releases. And everything.
All that math stuff that we all need to do. So we need to get those projections done. We need to know what it's really going to cost to build out. We need to get really good contractor bids. We need to get really solid timelines. And when we're negotiating that LOI, it's a function. So the letter of intent, it's a function of the base rent versus the free rent period. So let's say we want 90 days to build out after we've pulled permits, not 90 days just before anything, because it's going to take 90 days just to get our permits, right? So the landlord is doing math in their head, time value of money, and then the longer the term of the lease, the better terms you can usually negotiate.
Right.
So if you're doing
we went for like 10-year leases. Yeah, we would go for
or you can do a 5-year with a 5-year option.
Which scared us in the beginning, because we thought, what if this fails? I'm on the hook for 10 years.
Yeah, and
personal guarantees.
Right. So, the other thing is, if you are going out for funding with a loan, your loan and your lease need to be equally as long. So what I mean by that is, if you need a 10-year loan, which you probably do, so you would do a 5-year lease with a 5-year option, right, to get to that 10 years. Or you could do the 10-year, but a lot of landlords aren't even doing 10-year deals right now for new concepts, because they don't want you to fail either and then be on the hook. They need to be able to flip you out of there if need be.
And who knows what the future's bringing? Are rents going up or going down? In some sectors they're skyrocketing. In other sectors, office buildings and maybe retail centers, they're not skyrocketing. Maybe they're going backwards.
Yeah, it depends on the use for sure. But you have to remember, the big landlords, their debt was probably variable. And so when the interest rate started going up, they went upside down. So these big landlords may be suffering against that, as well as the vacancy
and
from
I'll tell
COVID.
you, one of the things that it would help, why I would come to somebody like you, is I need to understand. It's like playing poker. What's the other side holding?
Yeah.
Where are they coming from? What are their intent?
Yep.
Too often we thought, well, surely, they would never do that. And we didn't understand their perspective. We didn't look at it from their point of view.
Yeah.
And so we didn't understand what was realistic and what wasn't. For example, the building burned. They rebuilt it, and they wanted to triple the rent. They said, but you're not going to get anybody in this thing. It's going to sit there for empty. And it did sit there empty. But if they had accepted it, they bought the building based on a certain pro forma, a certain performance per square foot. And if they accepted a loss here, the bank could call their loan back and say,
100%.
You're not meeting the expectations, so you lose. So they'd rather it sit empty and hope that somebody's going to rent it, and just tell the bank we're working on it, rather than say, we gave up, we were wrong, it's only going to ever rent for this much, and we borrowed based on this much. Yeah.
Well, I tell my clients, look, we need to speak the language of the landlord.
Yes.
And so, I was a retailer before I was ever a landlord. So I can run around all sides of the table and help craft that messaging so that people understand why they're going down this path or what might come of it, so they can pivot. Because again, like you and I talked about before we started, is, when you're trying to get something, ask how to get a yes, rather than telling people what you want to do. Because when you're new in something, you might not know the
and these
path.
cities nobody gets fired if they say the word no. Well, but then I want people to build my business. Okay, next.
Yeah.
Their job is to protect and not to have any unexpected things. The landlord, as much as you think they're desperate or want to give away the space, They're not.
They're
foolish.
not.
Yeah.
You know, the other thing that I think the listeners should also know is the lease and the loan. The funding needs to be identified, and the lease and the loan get signed almost simultaneously. You can't. They're not going to give you the loan without the lease, but you can't. If you've already signed the lease, then the lender is going to look at you like, "What are you doing?"
Yes, right.
There's a lot of work through there, and a small business
here.
loan is like 90 days out too.
So I'm going to guess 99% of people owning little retail stores up to big retail things have no consultant. They're doing it because they think they can figure it out. They got a million people telling them how to do this thing here. And if they've never done it before, they're going to run into a lot of problems.
Yeah.
I made a living for a while acting as a consultant for some part of getting the approvals and stuff. I didn't know about all the lease negotiations and so a little bit. You guys are free.
No cost, no catch.
That's unbelievable. I mean, the person that they all need is right here, right now, and all they got to do is call their local SBD center and get referred to somebody like you, or maybe you.
Yeah, for sure. And I tell people, stay in your lane. You know, people go to school and they get licensed to do a lot of things. They have experience to do a lot of things. If you don't have that expertise, rely on one of us that does, so that we can help get you over the finish line.
So what's it like when they come to you? Because they probably come to you after they've screwed up. I suspect many people aren't smart enough to reach out to the SBDC beforehand. They've gotten into trouble. They need help, and now you're going to have to magically fix this. And can you help us? That's why they start searching around for help here.
They do, and it wasn't because they weren't smart enough to find us. It's because they just didn't know to look, right?
I didn't know.
And so, you know, when they come, it's a giddy up because now we have time is ticking, and we cannot lollygag, we cannot ponder, we cannot beg forgiveness. We've got to plan and be very strategic on how we go about it.
Right.
And if we have to get that landlord in the conversation to assist, then we need to do that. But whatever it takes, and we have to timeline it, and you know, it's just not the time to ponder.
It's not the time to ponder. And two, what's the failure of small retail businesses, small restaurants, small stores? It's got to be pretty high that first year. And a lot of it is because, one, they didn't go through any process or planning. It'll be fun. We'll open up a shoe store.
It'll be fun.
Yeah, right? We'll all get together. It will all be fun. It'll open a bar. That's what we thought. It'll all be fun.
Yeah.
And so they waste time, waste money, and they're behind the eight ball from the beginning here.
Mm-hmm.
And then that kills them because before the business can really launch and take off and get an audience and figure out all the kinks and stuff, they run out of cash.
That's, you know, usually they're underfunded. Their resources are too low. They don't have enough teammates.
Right.
They don't have enough knowledge.
Yes.
They don't have enough time. They don't have enough money. And most brick and mortars need somewhere around 8 to 10 months to break even.
Wow.
And so that means you can't just build it and they will come. You actually have to have a marketing strategy, and you need to giddy up on that horse too.
Yeah. Right.
It's not just going to happen magically.
Pretty daunting. And yet, I suspect that after COVID, more and more people who've been laid off or who've gotten tired, they're working at home now, and they said, this could be fun. I'm going to turn this into a business. I'm going to build a daycare center. I'm going to bake cookies for a living and sell this. I'm finally going to do my dream now here. It's. I was talking to Mike the other day, and I said, has the recession and COVID and everything killed dreams? He said, I think it's the opposite. I think it's kicked them into gear. People are looking, now's the time. Life is short. My job is not as guaranteed as I thought. It's now or never. More and more people want to go back in. And this perception that retail's dying and going away and brick and mortar is disappearing, I think it's the opposite. I think it's what you said. Good retail will always be there. Bad retail's
it's if it's underwhelming, nobody cares. But if you have a really great experience when you're interacting, whether it's a bakery, a cafe, a store, a salon, a Pilates place, it doesn't matter. You know, it's really about how the customer feels when they come in, and do they want to come back? Is there something that is robust enough to bring them back?
Well, I hope you'll come back and talk more about this, because there's so much. We just touched the surface on all of this. And there is a dream alive in many of us to open that store, to open that business. Wouldn't it be fun? Wouldn't it be wonderful to work for yourself? And it can be, but only if you make it through the first year or two until it becomes a success. There's challenges keeping it alive, but it's a real challenge is getting it up and going. And you're entering a world you know nothing about.
Yeah. So, you know, timing is everything. People think, oh, I'm going to talk to Karie tomorrow and I'm going to open next month.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is, I have a client, we always joke around about it. They're very young, and they came and talked to me in August a couple years ago saying, I want to open in October. And I said, of next year, right? And they said, no, this year. And I said, of next year, right? And they said, no, this year. and it was the next year, because it just takes that long to get everything in place, because, you just can't slam stuff in.
What center do you work out of primarily?
I work out of the Cal State Fullerton Center, and we're located in Irvine, but we're all virtual. And so, it's all Orange County and Inland Empire. And so because of my specialty, a lot of my colleagues will tap me on the shoulder and say, hey, Karie, can you co-consult with me on this one?
You got to be one of the few. That's what surprised me. We'll talk more about in this series. The depth of the team at the SBDC. So many people with so many unique specialties who've decided to come together and offer their expertise. And,
I got 115 other colleagues that if it's not my lane, it's their lane.
Yeah,
right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So check it out. It's, SBDC.org, I think it is, or something. I forgot.
It's the OCIE SBDC.org. Yeah.
OCIE for the Orange County Inland Empire, SBDC.org. Check them out. They've got a bunch of centers here throughout the area, and a bunch of good people like Karie Armstrong, and we're going to introduce you to some of them over the course of this series. Thank you so much for coming in, Karie Armstrong, and sharing what it can be an amazing journey or the scariest thing you've ever done, opening a business.
Or both.
Or both.
Thanks for having me on.
Okay.
Take care.
As we conclude another episode of the Profit Talks podcast, we hope we've empowered your entrepreneurial spirit. Reach out to us to connect with our experts, and let's take your business to the next level. Keep those dreams alive, keep pushing forward, and stay tuned for more. And if you liked what you heard in today's podcast and you want your business to reach new heights, just contact us at profittalkspodcast.org or call us at 1-800-616-7232. That's 1-800-616-7232. So until next time, keep thriving.